Welcome to the National Historic Oregon Trail Interpretive Center in Baker City, Oregon. My name is Ranger Dustin, and I will be your virtual tour guide as we take a journey into the history along the Oregon Trail. No one had ever seen anything quite like it before. More than 300,000 men, women, and children crossed the trail. They sensed they were making history. While heroic, they were an imperfect people. Intolerant, prone to violence, exploitive, and sometimes ill-tempered, they carried mixed baggage. They brought their institutions, ideas, talents, and energies to a land already long occupied. They displaced the Native Americans and wrested a new territory in several states from what they perceived as wilderness. Despite tragic consequences, the story of the Oregon Trail is an epic of human endurance and reminds us of those who came as empire builders. Immigrants were motivated to hit the trail for a variety of reasons. Economic turbulence like the Panic of 1837, the deadly cholera pandemic sweeping the globe, land offered by the U.S. government, propaganda, and ideas of manifest destiny all convinced immigrants to take their chances out west. Before immigrants could cross the Oregon Trail, they first had to make their way to frontier towns like Independence and Westport, Missouri. Here they bought much-needed supplies, wagons, and expertise. After banding together with others into wagon trains, they headed west. When they did so, it was mid to late spring, and the conditions reassured them of their decision to go. The immigrants faced a strange expanse of land, quite unlike their wooded homes back east. They wrote about their epic journey as it unfolded, leaving us a rich, exciting legacy of journals and letters. From these echoes, we can learn about their struggles through grasslands and sagebrush, over rivers and mountains, and through sickness and fear. Somehow, despite the odds, they kept their eyes on the goal, bound for Oregon. The travelers paced their journey by natural landmarks, fastening familiar names and shapes to natural curiosities. The perpendicular sides of mountains presented the appearance of castles, forts, towers, verandas, and chimneys, with a blending of Asiatic and European architecture. It seemed as if the wand of a magician had passed over a city and turned everything to stone. Names like Devil's Gate, Chimney Rock, and Courthouse Rock adorned prominent features along the route. The immigrants looked forward to the next landmark, spring, tree, or rock formation. They learned to cope with the faces of nature, with the overwhelming vastness of the land. As the pioneers moved further north, about 915 miles west of Independence, it was clear to them that they had entered what was legally known as Oregon Territory and were halfway to the Willamette Valley. Thousands stood beside Pacific Spring and realized that they had now entered lands draining into the distant Western Sea. Prior to the Oregon Treaty of 1846, the crest of the Rockies was the edge of the United States. The Organic Act of 1848 set up the whole Pacific Northwest as Oregon Territory. At South Pass, the immigrants entered Oregon country, and there was no turning back. Native Americans were a source of dependable supply. They offered horses, berries, fish, and fresh meat, and made few demands in return: fish hooks, an old shirt, a file, some beads. Professional traders were something else. They knew they could charge outrageous prices and then some. No one liked them very much, but they were there, and the travelers needed their goods. For pioneers, the Native Americans represented the unknown with their different cultures, languages, and religious beliefs. The immigrant generation was often racist, intolerant, and prone to take matters into its own hands. Worst-case scenarios, rare tragedies, and exaggerations reinforced immigrant suspicions. Yet reality showed that Native Americans frequently assisted pioneers by serving as guides, traders, ferry operators, and friends. The Snake River region tried and tested all travelers. By July and August, when most passed that way, the country was burnt to death. Far into the night, the volcanic bluffs surrounding the immigrant camps radiated heat. Dust enveloped everything: oxen, food, containers, people. As one pioneer dryly commented, "Dirty faces are as numerous as the stars every evening." When immigrants managed to find water, they often discovered that many cattle had met their end in it. Livestock laid down and died from poisonous weeds and water, rattlesnake bites, scorpion stings, and diseases carried by ticks. Though the pioneers were crossing large stretches of seemingly empty land, civilization dotted the trail all the way to Oregon City. The U.S. Army was present on the trail from 1835 through the 1880s. Though the first order of business was to deal with animosities between natives and pioneers, troops spent more time on their auxiliary duties, maintaining roads and providing assistance to immigrants in distress. Between 1840 and 1880, over 40 forts, camps, and military stations were established on or within a day's ride of the Oregon Trail. Some existed only for a few months, but became important way stations where immigrants could buy supplies, get medical care, find information, and appeal to a recognized government authority for criminal justice. Many travelers voiced mixed feelings about the forts. They were eager to see them, but complained about what they found. The prices were too high, the inhabitants too savage, and their appearance disappointing. Along the Oregon Trail, there were many river crossings. Immigrants could likely not swim, and even those that could risked drowning in the treacherous currents of the Snake. The river's deep holes, surging water, and unexpected rises were perilous. Pioneers and their belongings, whether by fording, floating, or ferrying, had to cross. Many drowned attempting to get across the Snake River, and the endeavor, which was anything but simple, taxed the mental fortitude of pioneers. Death followed the pioneers at every turn. Runaway wagons spilled children beneath grinding wheels, guns misfired and blasted into arms and legs, young men drowned, wagons overturned and crushed the women riding in them, and then there was the dreaded cholera. At morning, all was fine. In the afternoon, people complained of not feeling well. By dusk, they were dead. Smallpox, mountain fever, and gut-wrenching dysentery plagued the travelers. Murder, suicide, or conflict with Native Americans were rare, but also took their toll. When pioneers came to the Blue Mountains, they faced their final test, an exciting and terrifying prospect as pioneers prepared for the last leg of their journey. Hailstorms and iced-over water buckets reminded the travelers that winters come early in the mountains. Axing their way through thick timber and hauling wagons up seemingly vertical inclines drained their small stores of energy, patience, and supplies. Beyond the Blues, travelers heading for Willamette had to decide between two unappealing routes: float down the Columbia River or take the Barlow Road. Whether they chose the road or the river, they risked losing everything. Fortunately, moments of joy and relief flickered brightly as they neared their goal. Friendly natives still provided fresh food, and the land itself more than fulfilled their hopes. While some pioneers' ultimate destination was the Willamette Valley, others entertained ideas of chasing the gold rush, homesteading other lands, or simply couldn't shake the rambling behavior they adopted to cross the Oregon Trail in the first place. Gold glittered magnetically in the waters of the American West. The California discovery of 1848 unleashed a succession of strikes which brought in waves of miners, settlers, and desperate people. Starting in 1862, the Blue Mountains and Wallowas of Oregon began to yield fortunes to those who labored hard. Wealth didn't come easy, but gold fed the dreams of a pioneering generation. Placer and lode mining and the spread of farming and stock raising changed the face of Baker Valley forever. A mixed population including Chinese laborers, Basque shepherds, and recent European immigrants scrambled for the land. They washed gold and irrigated their fields. They erected handsome buildings, planted trees, and called the place home. By 1890, Baker City had 4,500 residents. The valley drew trade, logging, and lumber, as well as tourists. The arrival of the railroad in 1882 created more property by linking northeastern Oregon to the nation. At the same time, grazing, new plant species, and mining upset the region's ecological balance. Fluctuating world markets brought agricultural depressions. Growth in booming Baker Valley gradually slowed, and a more modest stability took hold. Federal land management agencies have addressed the often conflicting needs of the American people. Their duties today range from dealing with water and air quality to right-of-way issues. The General Land Office handled survey, record-keeping, and distribution of lands. Later, the U.S. Grazing Service employed techniques which emphasized protection and improvement. Eventually, the two agencies were joined to form the Bureau of Land Management. For more than 10,000 summers and winters, Oregon was the domain of Native Americans. Living closely with nature, seeking her rhythms, moving with her cycles, the Native Americans treated their home gently. The people of the Columbia Plateau hunted, fished, and gathered roots and berries year-round. They named the mountains, rivers, and sacred rocks and valleys. Their descendants and their language live on through the Nez Perce, Cayuse, Walla Walla, Umatilla, Wayam, Tenino, and Wasco tribes. They shared a common belief that the earth is the mother of all people. When pioneers came through, they brought valuable items for trade and seemed very clever to the native population, but not wise. They upset the balance of everything they came into contact with when they passed through. They dug for gold and muddied the streams. They turned over the meadows and destroyed the camas. Pioneers passed on their sickness and diseases to the natives, which killed them and dramatically reduced the numbers of native populations. The newcomers also made war. The treaties at the Great Walla Walla Council of 1855 promised protection, but the miners and settlers took what they wanted. The times were bitter like winter when there was no more food. The world fell to pieces. Crossing the Oregon Trail was an epic undertaking, to say the least. For better or for worse, it was the largest voluntary land migration in human history. Those who crossed were not forced to go, but did so willingly in the pursuit of opportunity. Thank you for joining us on this virtual tour of the National Historic Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. We hope to see you on the trail soon.